good to have everyone here today for our professional development on techniques for better classroom discipline. When we look at different ways how to handle classroom discipline, I think it's always important to remember that establishing proper discipline begins with effective communication. As we can see in the pictures, in the very first picture to the left, this is a snapshot of the famous Andy Griffith Show. And we can see the teacher here. She has control of her student and probably has control of her classroom just by using nonverbal communication. The picture to the right, we see a teacher who is struggling to communicate with the students, and we can see the type of communication that he's trying to use. And I think as professional educators, we know that this type of communication will never work. And that's why we're having this presentation today, as many of you are just beginning teachers. And so we want you to remember that being patient, having a calm tone, and always striving to use communication effectively will pay off very well in your classroom. Common ways of establishing discipline and classroom control. Discipline is coupled with effective teaching strategies and techniques. We always have to remember that preparing before our classes come into our classroom enables us to have less interruption and have fewer chances for students to misbehave. Discipline is achieved through the effects of group dynamics on behavior. We have to also remember that if one individual sees that he can get control of the classroom by acting up, then he understands that his behavior is well accepted, and the group expectations will win the individual behavior. So classroom control is maintained when we get all the kids to understand that they must behave when they enter the classroom. I've looked at 5 ways to strengthen your classroom discipline. Also, we need to make sure that we adjust your tone in the classroom. You always want to let the students know that you are in charge, but also you want to make sure that you do it in a respectful manner. So be stern when giving directions. Always make sure that you know what you're talking about, such as the lesson for the day. Make sure that you've studied, that you know your material, and if any questions arise, that you do the best you can to answer those questions as accurately as possible. Also, make sure that with your tone that you show respect. I know that students are supposed to show teachers respect, but it's important also to make sure that the students know that we care, we want what's best for them. Some things I listed that you can use is nonverbal cueing. Sometimes not saying anything at all, just making an expression will get the students' attention. Having low profile intervention. Sometimes just going over to the student and just letting them know that they are misbehaving, that their behavior is not acceptable, and not drawing attention in the classroom to their behavior. Also, another thing we can use is positive discipline. As teachers, we always sometimes want to get on to students when they do something bad. But I believe that we must always encourage the students and congratulate the students when they do something good. So it's just as important. One thing, teachers, that you have to remember is you have to have patience. Always assess the situation. Don't always assume, and don't be so quick to judge. I know in the past I've had examples where I may be up at the board with my back turned, and an incident arises in the class, and I automatically assume that a certain student was guilty, and sometimes it's not that student. So we must make sure that we don't improperly accuse some students for misbehaving when they're not. We always need to try to incorporate the behavior into the lesson. This is one thing I did several years in the classroom, is if a student was misbehaving and I could tell that he was trying really hard to get other students' attention, I would sometimes use that behavior to apply it to the lesson that we were talking about that day. And the other suggestion is just to breathe. Take some time. Sometimes you just need to step out of the classroom for a minute. Regain yourself. Remember, we should always practice what we preach. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Students, pay close attention to your actions. They're always watching. Some are always waiting for you to do something wrong. So we have to make sure we do the very, very best we can do when we're in the classroom and around students. One example I use is modeling. The next thing I want to talk about is being a leader. We must always strive to lead in the classroom. You know, some of you teachers, you're just starting out. This may be your first year, and some of you it may be your second year. And you learn a lot from your first year, second, but you learn a whole lot from your first to, let's say, your 10th, and so on. Being a leader in the classroom, letting the students know that you are in charge, letting them know that you know what your role is. Always be kind and courteous and be friendly, but don't be their friend. This is not a position where you want to engage in extracurricular activities after school, not on school grounds, communicating through Facebook and other means that could get you in trouble. So you have to be very careful how you handle the situation. But most importantly, let them know that you care about them. And one example I've listed here is assertive discipline. This is an example of how, many years ago, really in some schools still use corporal punishment as a way to discipline students. And so there was a school in Washington, in Walla Walla, Washington, that tried a new approach. In the old approach, they had 798 suspensions, 50 expulsions, and 600 written referrals. In the new approach, they had 135 suspensions, 30 expulsions, and 320 written referrals. So the question is, what did they do different that caused their school discipline to decrease and their suspensions to drop? What they decided to do is, instead of instituting a zero tolerance policy, they decided to, when a student got in trouble or misbehaved, they decided to sit that student down and to speak with them briefly, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, let the student tell their side of the story, gather all the facts, and find out really and truly what caused the misbehavior and if there was any ways to prevent this in the future without suspending or expelling the kid. And we can see here how much it improved in this particular high school. Another topic I want to talk about is, why does mental health matter in school? We have so many students that are affected by mental health issues, and a lot of students go through situations that we don't know that they're going through. Some people call it the silent epidemic. Up to 1 in 5 kids living in the U.S. show signs or symptoms of a mental health disorder in a given year. Nearly 80% who need mental health services won't get them. And students with mental health disorders often have chronic absences and low achievement, which leads to disruptive behaviors. And as teachers, we're faced with the fact of we don't have the resources we need sometimes to handle all these situations. And a lot of times that we're bogged down with everything we have to do during the school day, and we don't spend the time we need with these students to make sure they're getting the proper resources. So we have to look at what can we do. One thing that we can do is build a mental health friendly classroom. Teachers, I encourage you to be knowledgeable on the signs, the warning signs of students who are dealing with mental health issues. So let's look at depression. Some of the things that we can help students who deal with depression is be an active listener. Listen to what they have to say. Sometimes students are willing to tell you things that they want someone else to know. And so we need to offer words of encouragement, and we need to put them in cooperative learning groups so they can interact with other kids. Kids that deal with anxiety, we need to make sure that we engage in positive conversations with these students. We need to make sure that we are not criticizing these students for every little thing they do wrong, and we need to make sure that they are in support groups. Addiction. We need to make sure we emphasize positive, sober behavior, and we need to discuss the effects of destructive decisions. One good example that comes to mind usually is around prom time, when students sometimes want to do some things that normally they wouldn't do during the regular school year. So we have to make sure that we allow them the time to reflect, to understand, and they must evaluate specific decisions they will make that could affect their lives. So we make sure the key word here is help. We need to make sure that they seek help and they receive help. Mental health disorders can affect classroom learning and social interactions, both of which are critical to the success of students. However, if appropriate services are put into place to support young persons' mental health needs, we can often maximize success and minimize negative impacts for students. And teachers, if you'll look here at the bottom, I've listed some accommodations or strategies that may help you with students who have mental health issues. A couple of these we're just going to look at. Just allow time for the students to maybe turn in their work a little later than other students. Give them the option maybe to redo some of their work. Let them know that you care. Sometimes they just need a break. Sometimes they just need to walk out of the classroom and just relax just a little bit. And also make sure that when you do a presentation or when they stand up in front of the class and speak, make sure that you let them know ahead of time that they're going to be doing this, and make sure they feel comfortable with it. So, teachers, I encourage you. Today is the day that we get young people involved. Let's build positive relationships and character with our students. Let them know you care. Get them involved. It can be in athletics. It can be in robotics. It could be in JROTC. It could be in beautification club. It can be in all kind of extracurricular activities and clubs and organizations. This is a quote. I'm going to end my presentation to you today, but this is a quote I really want you to think about. The hardest thing to teach is how to care. I want to thank you for coming today. I hope the presentation will help you realize the importance of your position as a teacher, things you can do to help students. I wish you the best of luck. I've got a handout here I want to pass out to each one of you. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. Thank you.